All right, let's go.
So, Senator Kelly, thanks for your time. Just as a background, what is the appropriations process like? Can you just describe it, and what's your role in it?
Well, I mean, appropriating money for the federal government in Washington, D.C., that process, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a complicated, takes a lot of time, a lot of committees, a lot of subcommittees, not as efficient as you might think, but it's important to get it right. I mean, we really, I do especially take, my role in my participation in the appropriations process very seriously. People work very hard, for the money they make, and we got to be sure that their tax dollars, that the money they're paying in taxes is handled very responsibly.
And Marisol sent me, a full list of all the different things in terms of the border where money was appropriated. Is there one in particular that you felt was, important, or is there any of those in particular that specifically is going to come to the Yuma sector?
Well, let me, start with that. When things happen at our southern border, right? I think you know this, and people who live on the southern border know this, that Washington is often slow to act, and border communities have for too long paid too high of a price for what I think they would realize, because this is true, it's Washington in action. And the crisis on our border puts a strain on resources, and it puts a big strain on the communities on our southern border, especially Yuma. I mean, Yuma is a good example where resources often get strained. That's why I've continued to work in the Senate to make sure that our border communities get the funding it needs to first secure the border, and then ensure that as folks are coming across the border, that there is an orderly and humane process involved in doing that. So the government funding bill, the bill that is addressing this, takes some really important steps. Some of the things you asked about, what's important here. So technology is incredibly important. The technology that we need to prevent, to stop drug smuggling on the border and human trafficking, that's very high on my list. As high on the list for me, making sure that the Border Patrol and Customs has the resources to have an appropriately sized and trained and compensated staff. I mean, we need to have the adequate Border Patrol and Customs staff at our southern border. And then just getting resources to border communities and the nonprofits that are in border communities, those organizations that are often asked to help responding to things on the ground. So that's what's important. That's why it's great that this funding is going to be approved.
Yeah, and the funding, like you said, a lot of things going towards more border infrastructure, I guess you could say, and compensation of the officers along the border. But there's also funding for FEMA, right? So where do you kind of see the situation along the southern border as border security and maybe as humanitarian?
Well, I mean, it's a lot of things. I mean, it's technology. And technology supports the border security mission. FEMA, the money that's going to go to FEMA here is for emergency food, and it's money to help nonprofit organizations shelter migrants that are coming across the border. But there's also money for overtime for personnel and the infrastructure needed to process individuals. Transportation can be a big cost. Moving, folks from the southern border to, further inland to nonprofits and to process them. And, sometimes these folks could be, returned to Mexico. Other times they could be, sent to, other, parts of the country. I mean, so there's a lot involved here. The really important stuff for me is that technology that we need for border security and making sure that Border Patrol especially has the resources they need.
You referenced making sure, through the appropriations process that you're spending the taxpayers' money, properly and responsibly. The budgets of CBP and ICE, have gone up through multiple, presidencies. It's, I think, at $25 billion for 2021. Are you concerned about, the increase in that budgeting, considering, you have the record levels of the apprehensions and all these other issues, we're talking about? What do you feel is maybe the final answer to all the problems?
Well, we've got a crisis on our southern border, and it's obvious to me very early in this job that Border Patrol, CBP, and other agencies that have to deal with this problem need the necessary funding to do that. So if we have to, spend more money on the problem, as long as we're doing it responsibly, hey, I'm all for that. And I've been an advocate of it.
And you earlier, you've sent a letter to President Biden about the gaps in the Yuma sector. Specifically, the Department of Homeland Security said they're going to close them. Secretary Mayorkas visited the Yuma sector, talked about closing those gaps. I checked this morning; they're still open. Do you know? Do you have any updates on where that project or construction stands?
Yeah, so it's something I am on the phone with DHS on, Homeland Security on the phone with them frequently about this, sometimes in person. I saw Secretary Mayorkas a couple of weeks ago. He assures me that this is being, worked on. And I'm going to continue to push Homeland Security to make sure that this issue of these open gaps is addressed.
Do you have any sort of timeline on anything or not?
Hey, if I, in my opinion, sooner the better. But I do not have I haven't been given a deadline.
Got you. And again, this anything specifically in terms of the money that is coming to the Yuma sector, or is it just going to be kind of implemented across the entire southern border, which obviously Yuma is in?
Well, I mean, my goal here is to make sure that Arizona, that our southern border, because we have what I consider a crisis, and it's a challenging issue for Border Patrol, for Customs, for law enforcement, for sheriff's departments, for NGOs in the community, for mayors and city councils. I mean, this is a tough problem. So I'm going to work on making sure that we get our fair share, if not more, of those resources.
Perfect. I know you said you have 10 minutes, so I think you've given me that. Is there anything else, though, that you just want to add about the appropriations in general, or anything else that you want to talk about?
Hey, we've got a lot of stuff going on in the world right now, and it's it's important that the government functions well. I'm working on that. I've got some government accountability measures that I've introduced. One that requires qualified blind trusts, so members of Congress aren't trading in stocks and the information they have as a member of Congress. Another piece of legislation that prohibits folks from taking corporate PAC money, which I also think is very important. Another one for making sure that members of Congress post their schedule publicly, so the public, people we represent, know what we're doing. Of 535 members of Congress, there's only one person that does all those three things right now, and that's me. But I'm welcoming all my other 400 or 534 colleagues to do the same thing, and we're eventually going to get this done through legislation.
Perfect. Well, Senator Kelly, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.
Great to be on. Thank you.
Yep.
See you, Adam.
Bye.